Hello everybody, welcome to the patch 13.5 rundown for amateur play. My name is Quintic. Today I'll be using the system of predictive criteria that I've been developing to help me assess the probable impact of the patch on all levels of amateur competition, with a special focus on platinum and below. It's a big patch. I'm working through a lot of fatigue, and although I'm still confident in the predictions that I'm about to make because I have so much support from my systems, do be sure to check the comments down below if you're watching this a week after release when we've got our updates, especially since this does seem to be a pretty big patch, right? First up is Yuumi, and I'm not going to be talking much about Yuumi because I just released a day one Yuumi. We did consider it a major enough update to do our PvE sessions, our in-house testing, and she is very different, very, very, very different, right? So to see everything that she's done differently, go watch Day 1 Yuumi, but the TLDR is she's very much like a pure protective enchanter now, and if she gets out of lane, she is absolutely giga broken. It's ungodly powerful. This champion is not okay in current state, but once balanced in terms of numbers, she will be quite a lot healthier. Aatrox is getting some minor cooldown changes and some bonus AD, so he's getting some power restored. The slow on W is increasing with ranks, and the cooldown on W is increasing with ranks. World Ender's power is going up towards predominantly level 16. So they're buffing Aatrox's third max spell, and they're buffing his level 16 ultimate. Effectively, what this tells me is they think Aatrox's scaling is too poor, and I would agree. Aatrox kind of reverted back to his 15 to 25 minute aggro-ish champion identity where he really wants to close out the game with a slight snowball at that 30-minute mark. He was definitely not performing nearly as well in teamfights as he was at his peak. Absolutely none of the last set of nerfs were rolled back in any way. These are completely new, different buffs. Basically, though, Aatrox is already in a playable spot for amateur play. He's definitely not a bad champion, and this will just smooth out his end game so he doesn't feel as bad to scale with, and you're not as pressured to play him really fast. So, small changes, but nice changes is what I expect. Ashe is here. They are trying to nerf support Ashe, specifically mandate support Ashe. This is another freak project, and he has gone on record to say he doesn't mind support Ashe existing, but it is blatantly overpowered. They're trying to give some compensation buffs to AD carry Ashe, and that's what we see in the Q, right? Q is cheaper, and the empowered duration is longer, so with attack speed, you just get a longer window to DPS someone down. Volleys... Hang on. Oh, this is not the change list that was initially put onto the PvE. Originally, they were going to hit Volley's cooldown, but because they didn't, they really just went into the pre-11R cooldown. I mean, Ashe is still going to be more than capable of just playing for mandate utility, no? What we actually see here, it is meaningful that a poke champion's poke spell loses 10 damage. It's a tiny amount, but it adds up tremendously on a poke champ. It is meaningful that Ashe has fewer windows to fish with. Simultaneously, it is meaningful that AD carry Ashe gets a longer duration to DPS someone down, although I would argue that this is good, but the least meaningful change in this patch list. And truthfully, yeah, I mean, we have just a blatantly overpowered champion who is getting some nerfs that are hitting her power, but not so much that you're not going to be able to pick her. And especially since the support item changes were not nearly as extreme as some people were fearing, you're going to be totally fine to pick her. She's just not, best champ in the game, right? Aurelion Sol. So... this is a lot of numbers all at once. They're basically just saying, he too tanky, he do too much damage. So, 5% AP off of Breath of Light, on its own, fine, don't really care. DPS champ, DPS nerf, that's never something we have to worry about, when the champion already does, excellent damage. Let's check his durability, though. So yeah, we're just barely, at level 6, we're just barely within our window of a new lethal window for like physical champions. The 40 burst matters around 15-16, where we have to care about because Aurelion Sol is a high XP Roa user. He is losing like over 200 effective HP against physicals, which is a very, very big deal, especially since most of this effective HP is like actual HP. Aurelion Sol is not a champion that should be getting blind picked anyway. He is a counter pick or a counter developed champion for sure. The type of control champ that gets locked in when you know he can scale and just dumpster the game. So in that sense, I don't think Aurelion Sol is weaker at all. But you will be less concerned about people just slamming him because he will be easier to punish. Like, especially if you're running something like Jason to him, if you're capable of playing that. You'll find some decent assassin counter picks. Zed is something that really thrives into Aurelion Sol's trading pattern, where he's bad against blinks and stuff like that. So just be mindful of that. I don't think he's dramatically weaker, but he is definitely more vulnerable when just going like completely all in, more vulnerable to some of his lane matchups. That 200 absolutely matters in mid game for aggressive plays, not for defensive plays. What is this? Oh, this is a fundamental rework. Okay, so TLDR, Azir last patch did land stronger. We said he was going to be volatile. Either his mana pool was going to be heavily limiting, or he was just going to really thrive off his damage buffs. It turned out he thrived. He was really good on 13-4. And now just, we need to read the context on this one. Azir is a pretty nifty champion and it's exciting to watch. The vast majority of players, even in Challenger, don't find appropriate success with him. Here's the rationale. Weaken his early game, give him compensation in late. Second, push him away from early Q poke and awkward soldier spam and raise his overall DPS otherwise. Third, update his base stats to bring back Nashor's Tooth as a viable option. Fourth, buff tools that especially help fledgling Azir players. More auto attack damage in case soldiers aren't in range, and a stronger passive turret that's up more frequently so Shurima's legacy can protect him. Okay, so like right off the bat, I'm just going to assume that Azir doesn't want to pivot directly back into Nashor's Tooth because Nashor's Tooth is not a particularly dominant item. The only reason that would end up happening is if Azir has literally nothing but DPS after these changes. But, you know, there's a lot going on here, so let's find out. Significant reduction in base health, significant increase in armor growth. He's not getting any armor, or he's not getting any health growth in compensation. Mana down even further, so he's got 320. Mana growth up a little bit. Attack damage growth up notably. Base attack speed is unchanged, but the ratio is higher. Okay, DPS champion getting a ratio buff. That is a significant boost. However, Azir only has realistically like 1, maybe 2 options if we count Berserker's Greaves to profit from this, so it's probably going to be less insane than it would be on like most DPS champions, because Azir's weird. Attack speed growth is up quite a bit. Yeah, they're really trying to push him to DPS sort of stuff. Shurima's legacy duration is far lower, which is actually really bad for setting up these like strangleholds over Dragon and Baron at the same time. Damage is going up dramatically, no longer scales per minute, but scales on level. Damage is up significantly. However, it no longer deals bonus damage to champions, so it's just going to be better at farming as well, I suppose. Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. Now applies Azir's spell effects as a single target spell. The armor is now scales based on level. The magic resist scales on level and is like initially lower. It's actually quite a lot lower always. The debuff loses 100 armor and magical resist while Azir is far away or dead. The cooldown is quite a bit shorter, so you get it every 3 waves rather than every 6. Shifting Sands, the poke damage is down by 10 per rank, like all ranks. AP ratio is up, buff at 200 AP and above. That's a lot of AP, but it's reasonably easy to get. The mana cost is absolutely damning. Oh my god, a base 320 mana pool, and now Conquering Sands costs 85? That's ridiculous. The soldiers no longer grant attack speed, but have big amounts of flat damage when they hit. So it reads very strangely because, like, truthfully, these two things should not be lumped in one patch note. It basically says Azir soldiers no longer have bonus % passive attack speed instead, the magic damage they deal is based on level and W rank. This is what you gain on soldier damage from leveling W. The rest is a level scaling effect. Now he's not gaining a ton of bonus attack speed while 3 or more soldiers are spawned too. So Azir just cannot access attack speed from his spells really anymore. Shifting Sands magic damage is going down because they're rolling back some of the buffs he got last patch. And so, oh, this is complex. Okay. Fortunately for us, the wiki is updated for current patch. Mana pool at 1 is 320. Atrocious at 9 is more approaching 600. So it is easier to spam that, like, rank 5 Q. But what do you really get out of it, right? I know this is only plus 10 damage per rank and only minus 1 second cooldown per rank, but the cost is much, much less. Even though on paper it looks like Qmax is still what gives you more, I fear, looking at these changes, that Azir is actually going to be kind of pushed into Wmax just to have the means to lane. Okay, if we break it down, yes, he is squishier and will have a harder time accessing his raw burst. Yes, his burst, his Q poke in lane is definitely harder to find value from. It is very costly. That might actually dramatically harm his sequences. His turret is just randomly so much stronger, but how often are you getting combat value out of his turret? It's realistically not something that should be happening very often. So, really, we're just looking at this attack speed growth and like this extra magic damage. It's something that absolutely says, like, hey, if you build a lot of attack speed, you are getting, like, all of this flat damage over and over. But, you know, he's still a champion who likes pen. He's still a champion who, outside of lane, is going to get, like, this kind of Q value, right? All in all, these changes feel weird. I can't really imagine how these make him more accessible to lower-level players. Because the way I see it, it now really just cements him into his, like, kite back DPS slowly through soldiers identity, which requires coordination and setup. You need to have a comp that kites back. The lane phase is still difficult to play. Yeah, that's probably it. It's really hard to predict the impact of these changes. Azir looks noticeably weaker, but if he's not noticeably weaker, it's because Berserker Greaves, Alacrity, Lethal Tempo is doing a lot for him. And this is a change that we really need to feel out. If you are a low-level amateur player who doesn't play Azir, again, the advice still holds. Don't go to Azir. I don't think this made him more approachable.
Azir support is so much worse. Don't do it. He needs even more items now. You can't just build Rylai's. Don't do it.
And poor Azir top, too. Oh, Azir top looks so bad right now. Caitlyn is nuts. Caitlyn is the best AD carry. Caitlyn really benefited from the AD carry itemization changes a while ago that let her build IE second. She was probably, like, the happiest with that. What they're doing to her, though, is just 2 base AD down, 1 base armor down, and this is such a small stat change that we are expecting virtually no impact on her. DPS champion losing some DPS when she's got plenty, not going to make a difference. Okay, so this is interesting. They are trying to make Fizz's mana mana costs less intense. And they're doing that significantly on E, right? It's going down 15 all ranks. The magic damage on E is going up 10. That is not within the threshold of something that matters for our burst champion. Although I don't know Fizz's wave clear patterns intimately, and it's possible that barely cheats out a breakpoint. Probably not on just 10, though. Seastone Trident will now refund 100% of its mana cost. Every time Fizz in particular gets a mana buff, we have to start looking at his pseudo-tank A-haste builds, which on paper, if they were to exist, is the best way to play Fizz. There is also a Cosmic Drive change coming up here, which we will check out. I'm just going to go out and say that I no matter what I try to do here, I will have an uninformed opinion on Fizz. I apologize. I can't get past that, so I won't make a major prediction. I will say that this is the type of buff that unlocks like his theoretically optimal pseudo-tank builds, but I would be surprised if it started to exist off this alone. Okay, Gangplank. Thank goodness trial by fire damage is going down because, like, he did not need this at all. He was absolutely overkilling you. Now Gangplank's powder keg cooldown does not decrease with ranks. And this is just a really nice quality of life that everyone should appreciate. It just gives everybody more information. Lovely and lovely. However, champ still overkills, right? We have a champion with excessive damage, losing damage, which is good and correct, but it will not be enough to, like, knock him down from just being this, like, ridiculously obnoxious champion. You will have to pilot him a little bit better rather than just point and clicking everything. This is just a tool to punish you for missing kegs and, like, wasting them, using them badly, losing the keg minigame. It means Gangplank's output throughout a team fight is going to be weaker. However, it's not going to impact his setup phases. It's not going to impact his ultimate influence throughout the fight. Gangplank is still obviously going to be very, very, very strong. And it would be a follow-up patch that actually hits him. It's just finally, he's not completely excessive and he doesn't scale in effectiveness throughout a single fight quite as much. He has to land his first few barrels. Hey, Jinx buffs. Okay, sure. Oh, that's just, okay. I was about to say, I was side-eyeing this. I'm like, they didn't just give Jinx a ratio change, did they? No, they did not. They gave Jinx some attack speed growth. They undid a nerf onto her Super Mega Death Rocket. Her Zap is easier to access, and the slow is noticeably stronger. Wow, wait, 10% slow increase on a very long-ranged skill shot. Actually is meaningfully power impacting, right? That is a major difference in your ability to set up your own chompers. First of all, I like this. When Jinx lost this damage cap against monsters, it was honestly just catching strays to something that, like, people were developing counterplay for anyway. Like, Jinx started stealing a million Barons and it was really annoying, and then people are like, oh, we have counterplay to that, let's start doing it. But some people didn't start doing it, and so Jinx got nerfed, and it was kind of undeserved, but this is the baseline hyper carry. She is, like, the generic hyper carry. When Jinx is strong, you can play her. She often requires less protection than other hyper carries because she has the means to cover herself with traps and zap, and it's now actually better too, right? She's just dealing more damage, right? We're also entering a meta where she can compete a little more effectively because it's not quite as dominated by extreme hyper poke. And in Platinum, like, Jinx is still kind of queen. This is whatever. This is whatever. It's basically quality of life. This is meaningfully impactful throughout the game, and this is bigger than it looks. So, like, it's not going to be like big. It's not going to be like immediately catapulting Jinx into the dominant tier of 80 carries, but she's a champion who, like, always is performant in, like, Platinum and below. Easy to play, effective always, like, inoffensive. Yeah, nice. Absolutely. This is good for her. This will make her a more appealing pick. Kennen is actually getting buffs. Nice. Early cooldown nerf to early cooldown buff to a poke spell is a big deal. A significant damage increase to a poke spell. Guys, remember the last time we buffed Kennen Q and he was immediately one of the most dominant top laners? This is plus 20 base at rank 5, plus 10% AP on a 4-second spammable spell. That's pretty good. This is quality of life. This is wave clear. Okay. I mean, this is an increase to his wave clear. Ooh. So I've committed the classic blunder with Kennen of having opinions on him and then failing to write them down and then letting him kind of fizzle off into obscurity because we haven't seen him in forever. So just don't do that. Please write down your thoughts, guys. Historically, this type of change is really, really, really big for Kennen. What we can intuit about Kennen's problems right now is some post-durability update blues. The fact that he does fold to jungle intervention in a meta where junglers were ganking, like, a ton. And, like, some really polarizing matchup spreads where, you know, some champions just lose to him and some champions just beat him. Despite that, though, a ranged champion receiving wave clear makes it easier for them to plan out how they're going to get around the enemy jungler. A ranged champion getting a significant increase to their poke damage is a big deal. and to their short trade damage is a big deal. We're going to stop spending time on this one, and I'm just going to predict that by no means does this make Kennen a meta pick. By no means does this make Kennen, like, extremely contested or anything. But if we were perceiving him as quite weak before, he's at least, like, moderately playable now. And I think he was a meta call into Jax. You can pick him there. And if the problem is durability update blues, then you can probably just snowball and plat minus and still gain a lot of value out of him. So, would appear to be a playable champion to me. LeBlanc is receiving what would appear to be the most dangerous thing to give to LeBlanc, which is wave clear. So the number one predictor of LeBlanc's power changing is W damage, because that's just all of her wave clear, right? What is she? She is a champion that has, truthfully, some of the hardest farming patterns in the entire game. You just have to rely on your weirdo auto attack. And she's a champion that, like, doesn't play nicely in practically any theoretical team archetype. And has to gain all of her value through snowballing, through setting up, like, catches and kills, and just getting her random poke stuff. Like, she really does need to be snowballed to justify her existence, or she fits so awkwardly into everything. Wave Clear gives her agency. Wave Clear means she's not half a champion when her jungler isn't nearby, because that's a problem she very often falls into. Wave Clear gives her the means to impact side lanes more effectively and properly snowball while being an aggro champion, which is necessary, right? Killing a unit with either part of Sigil or Malice restores 100% of the mana cost and 30% of the spell's remaining cooldown. It is free. And Sigil of Malice now deals an additional 10 to 146 damage to minions. Considering that Sigil of Malice deals, like, baseline 65 plus 40% AP, you know, roughly an auto attack here, but quickly scales up, right? That's really not bad. You can auto queue things all the time to last hit. Like, because that's the thing. We now freely get auto queues. Cooldown is locked at 6 seconds. We're still maxing W first, no question. We're probably not putting an extra. Are we putting it? See, now we have an interesting question. Does it become worth it for LeBlanc to invest a single extra point into Q just for this extra minion damage because she's getting it so often? Obviously, we still want W max first. This cooldown is too important. This AoE damage is too important. This is too much of her burst. But, like, we're not expecting LeBlanc to be popping her mark on minions. We're expecting LeBlanc to be last hitting with marks. So we're not looking at this. We're looking at this. Of course, RQ now does the same thing, which is weird. It's the buff is exactly what LeBlanc needs, but is it enough of exactly what she needs? I would imagine it almost certainly does in Platinum and below. Almost surely. Top level, we'll see. LeBlanc is pretty terrible right now, and it will take a lot to make her, like, genuinely excellent. But she is definitely more appealing to have on your team because, like, it just enables her to do more, and she needs to do more. So it looks promising. Pantheon, his base attack speed is going up. His health regen is going down. His early Q cooldown is going down, but that's not going to matter for very long as a top laner. It'll matter quite a lot more as a support, actually. Mana cost down slightly. That's a small change, but it's a nice one. Small change, but it's a nice one. Nah, I'm not really feeling any. I mean, it is a change to a lot of different factors, and whenever there's a change to a lot of different factors, like, that's usually kind of implying a major power update, but it's like, okay, he's losing some HP 5, which is hard to assess with the criteria that I have right now. He's gaining some attack speed, and actually quite a bit of it, which is definitely nice to have for farming and for extended trades. This is intended to help him in earlier extended trades, which is good, but the impact, like, don't forget, this is effectively 1 second off early Comet Spear, which is affecting top lane Pantheon the least. And this is ultimately just a late game nerf. So if this is negligible, all of this Q change is negligible. This is good for long trades, and this is just a net nerf, like, it kind of feels like it neutralizes, to be honest. I don't know, I just have a hard time envisioning Pantheon, like, meaningfully changing outside of, like, how he plays his matchups, not in how we would draft him, you know? Now this is a buff. I truthfully really like Kiana. I actually like it when she's in the game. I think she's like she's an assassin who really can thrive in coordinated play, and we don't get many AD assassins who are like that. So it's just, Kiana's kind of a breath of fresh air, to be honest. This is absolutely a change that matters. Why? It's only plus 20 damage on a burst champion. How can that matter? That's not 20. She gets 2 of these in every combo. That's 40. That's absolutely our threshold that matters for lethal windows. And then on top of that, it's just minus 1 second all ranks E. Now this is very important, because what is one of the types of spells that really gets hit by cooldown changes? In combat spammable mobility. And we define that as like 6 second or less mobility, which can be used all the time in a fight. And this is like actually almost becoming that at 13. That's unlocking a lot, especially since Kiana can just stall for the cooldown too, right? She can actually play out this longer sequence with her Invis Q before she unlocks the full impact of this. And yeah, I'd say Kiana probably becomes a bit more of an appealing pick if you have Kiana in your pool. Probably not in the jungle. This won't solve anything there, but in the mid lane, yeah. Rammus makes yet another appearance in the patch notes. If you had told me like 2 years ago that Rammus would be in every other patch note, I would not have believed you, and yet here he is. Rammus is still very powerful. How did you manage to make him a 56% win rate champion on one patch, a 41% win rate champion on the next, fix things around, and now he's still very powerful? Like I actually don't, I basically don't even want to look at this. Like, I don't even want to assess Rammus. Why assess Rammus when everything's going to change again, right? What is it? It's a 20 damage nerf to Q, and it is an attack damage growth change that will long-term affect his clear speed, but it comes online at the time where his armor's really coming online. Like, whatever. I don't care to have an opinion on Rammus at this point. He's jumping around way too much. This is not a champion whose primary output relies on the burst damage he's dealing, and so this doesn't matter. The rest of his output is there. It's fine. It's good. And the only way this could matter is if it affects his clear. And so whatever state Rammus was in before, which at this point I can't even keep track of it because he's just, like, shifting with all the item changes and all the jungle changes and all his own changes. It's like, bing, bong, bing, bong, I'm broken, I'm terrible, like, I'm solidly average, like, whatever state he was in before, he's pretty much in it now. The Rumble change shipped, which is insane. Let's break it down. The magic resist shred on 1 harpoon is now going up to 20%, which means the magic resist shred on 2 harpoons is going up to 40, but that doesn't account for danger zone. When you hit 2 harpoons, you will now shred 40% of your MR. However, if you hit a danger zone missile, that is 60% MR. 60%. 60% MR reduction. Not penetration, reduction. If you hit a non-danger zone missile and then a danger zone missile, it just gives you this, by the way, because it just retroactively converts your last missile into the danger zone one. Rumble is reducing 60% MR best case for all of his teammates. You can break, like, any solo AP rule in the game with this champion running around on your team as long as his target is sufficiently short-ranged. This is insane for durable targets that Rumble top lane is facing. This doesn't make a major difference for Rumble mid lane, which is good because Rumble mid lane was already very strong. This is ridiculous for Rumble support as well, just because the utility is very potent and you can pair him with a bunch of magical champions into durable champions, right? This is an exceptional amount of utility for Rumble. I don't know for sure if it actually makes Rumble top lane noticeably stronger. I would imagine that it does. I do know for sure that Rumble mid lane is probably free elo into any melee matchup. Samira, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this one. Last week, I said that I think theoretical Samira is not that good, but Samira is very performant in solo queue and very performant in amateur, and amateur teams have reported her being able to be blind picked. I said that the nerf she got last time was very significant, which means that it will matter for amateur Samira, but probably not as much as I predicted. Now they're partially rolling it back. So just partially roll back my own opinion where I said this is major. Now it's just like this is reasonably big. And if it's now reasonably big, then it's less so in solo queue and amateur. And so Samira, probably fine. I personally am not fond of her in terms of theoretical power level, which means nothing to you, right? I'm just laying my biases on the table. Tryndamere is getting some health growth and some attack damage growth, which for a... I mean, I guess we have to check EHP. Wow, an increase of 70 effective HP at level 18. It's a very nothing change. It's a DPS champion getting a little more DPS and a little more durability. It's a very nothing change. Twitch is a menace. Very good support. Very good mid. And extremely dominant in specifically platinum level play, but very strong everywhere. Twitch is losing overall 30% AP in his full stacked E, which is a major chunk of burst. That is, on Nashor's alone, though, only a change in 30 damage. 30 damage is like just shy of our 40 burst threshold, and he is still a champion who will have his auto attacks. So if I'm being honest, I don't think this is going to be like completely damning for Twitch, like AP Twitch. Now, I have been saying some pretty misleading things about ratios lately. On Twitch's one item spike, he has only lost 30 damage, which is outside of our lethal threshold. As the game goes on and he gets more items, though, he will feel that change more and more and more and more and more. So what this is doing is it is creating a greater divide between the performance of AP and AD Twitch. I don't think AP Twitch is going to be like meaningfully weaker in the early game when he's supposed to be strong, right? I don't think on his Nashor spike he's going to be meaningfully weaker. He's just going to feel meaningfully weaker at like 25, 30 plus minutes, especially on support budget, if he's not giga snowballing. Which is where AD Twitch would start to feel a lot more appealing. I like that there are greater trade-offs to running both styles of Twitch, and I like that AP Twitch is noticeably not dead. I would have to check his like wave clear potential in mid lane again, but what you should expect is a Twitch who is only like a little bit weaker, especially in levels of play where he's just going to incite chaos no matter what. And I wouldn't overreact to this change because it is outside of threshold. They had a really stupid set of nerfs for Zaya on the PBE where they're like, oh, we buffed her attack speed ratio and she went like insane. Let's revert her attack speed ratio and then also nerf E, which would have been a huge mistake. Yeah, so Zaya's buffs made her insane. She's very strong. What they are doing is they are reducing the damage. I believe this is damage per feather by 5. And the cooldown is up 1 second, which is going to be offset by quick blades when that spike is complete. Yeah, this is per feather. It's like minus 5% per subsequent feather. So, you know, it adds up more than it looks. It's only really going to be within a threshold on very high feather blade callers. And Zaya's not even a burst champ. She is a DPS champion. So, and she's still a DPS champion with a very good attack speed ratio who is still absolutely shotgunning you for getting too close to her. So ultimately, I don't think, with Quick Blades offsetting this, with this damage change and ultimately not being that big, it's not a hugely significant nerf for Zaya. Small impact. I personally still believe she should be counterpick only, but alas, we'll leave it at that. If you use her as a counterpick, she'll still be very strong. Yorick. So I saw that Yorick was going to get a nerf, and I thought, why? What did he ever do to you? And then I figured out what he's doing to you, and what he's doing is he's rushing Rav Hydra Cerildas and one-shotting you with ghouls, because they all just jump to you, cleave the Rav Hydra. It's absolutely a cheese pick, but it's such a disgusting, degenerate cheese pick when it works that they felt obligated to nerf it, which is really sad, but how funny is that? Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, Yorick's not a champion that's, like, competitively insane, but in Platinum minus amateur play, which does resemble solo queue to a degree, Yorick is fine, Yorick is good. But this is a nerf that matters a lot. Ghoul bonus damage going down 10%. And you see it is applied up to 8 times per ghoul. That's a lot of burst damage. And so poor Yorick, the one niche he was like really effective in, just this like despicable like split push like Jace juggernaut sort of thing. Yeah, I would assume upon looking at that and on having experience with Yorick, because he's one of my personal favorite top laners to play, it's probably pretty power impacting. Fortunately, if you are just a diehard Yorick player, Yorick does have like a crap ton of builds available to him. He has so many options. It just so happens that this particular one is going to be a little less funny into squishies. Is Yorick fine in theory? No, he's kind of bad in theoretical play. Does that matter to you, the Yorick player who plays in like platinum or below amateur play? No. No. So yes, it's kind of a Samira situation. Theoretically weaker, for sure, but it's also kind of a Senna situation because he has other builds that can offset it, and he'll still get the value that you need if you happen to be a Yorick player, as long as you accept that, like, Yorick on paper is not outstanding. For Zed, they are reverting a previous nerf, which reduced access to his E, and in compensation, because that would make Zed very strong again, they are preemptively nerfing his magic resist. On 1223B, the nerf that he got was minus 30 Q damage and minus 15 E damage in one combo, losing almost 50 base damage while also reducing access to E for team fights. Yikes! That is well above threshold for a burst champion. That is majorly power impacting, and it wasn't just the damage, it was also this. Yikes! Now, this is nice. Zed having increased means to play out a team fight and wait for his assassination is pretty cool and pretty good. It's healthy for the champion to have reasonable options. Without compensation for his damage, I cannot see Zed immediately returning to just like a dominant solo Q pick. Which also means that I struggle to see him being like absolutely outstanding into like general amateur play, right? Because if he is just lacking a little bit too much damage and assassin itemization isn't in the best spot to begin with, it's fine, it's nice. This is good. This really is good. But I mean, we just on this same patch had another assassin that actually received some necessary damage, and Zed has not, and it's good. It's a small positive change. Jungle adjustments. Okay, this is absolutely based. Junglers no longer deal less damage to their enemies' camps. I said something very stupid on the preseason patch. It was clear from the very beginning that spam ganks were going to be less punishable. I incorrectly thought that clear tempo would be the most reliable way to gain an advantage, just having better tempo on your opponents, like farming your own camps more effectively, but like obviously that's not how it played out. Spam ganking just was the way to go. Now that speed of counter jungling has been restored, it is significantly easier to cross-map counter invade somebody's ganks. And so there is quite a bit more of a trade-off when you just camp bot lane. I mean, coupled with, I think Oracle got nerfed on this patch, coupled with increased sweeper access, right? Spam ganking is noticeably weaker with this combined with everything else. Tempo junglers are going to be very happy with this. I think Nidalee has been like probably the worst champion in the game for a while now. This actually does restore some of her power because she was completely dependent on that counter jungling game. Graves is quite a bit better now. Fiddlesticks can be argued to have improved as well, like just being able to get in there like counter jungle. Karthus, right? Like anytime you're in a power farmer versus ganker matchup, like these champions just have more options. Healthy change, I'm happy to see it. I think I think we are really approaching a state of the game where like there's a lot of good diversity in what is meta and strong. We really see it in the bot lane. We're not seeing it as much in the mid lane because there's still like a bunch of weak mages. But we're probably going to start seeing it more in the jungle as well. I don't expect all the gankers to go away off this, but I absolutely expect jungling to be in more of a healthy spot. And we will see more carry junglers rise into prominence. If you're an amateur team trying to adapt to these changes, just check with the flexibility of what you guys are capable of playing. There's no need to hard pivot away from the tanks that you're running if you guys are running tanks. If you will have a jungler that's like really itching to play all their carries, it's your time to shine, right? But don't feel pressured to completely shake up your style to accommodate this, when all it really means is that it's just a bit more costly to make very dumb ganks, right? But there's more. Oh, there's more. There's quite a bit more. Plus 10 gold, plus 10 gold, plus 5 gold, plus 1 gold, plus 5 gold. That is rounded up to an extra 60 gold per full clear. Which is still not a full minion wave. And it doesn't create any, like, practical, faster 1100 gold bases. So it's one of those changes that just adds up over time, right? And now junglers can't gain much experience from lanes at all. We think junglers who commit to early gank should fall behind in experience to an enemy who is regularly farming, but we are farming. We're just making an intelligent decision to offset something that our allies have done incorrectly. So, like, I don't know. I can absolutely get behind this. I can absolutely get behind this. And laners can absolutely get behind this too, I promise. I don't see why junglers who are already gaining lower, like significantly lower experience than solo laners, as they should, need to also be nerfed in the condition that, like, I don't know, it just makes it feel really bad to help your lanes. And I don't like that. I don't like that it feels bad to help your lanes. It shouldn't feel punishing to help your lanes. Ultimately, this is just another one of those changes that's tells you to be very deliberate with your decision making, and better jungle wins. So Sweeping Lens. Ability powered. This is going to be felt very early in the game. 30 seconds off the sweeper. Does make it harder to deny vision around bot lane, especially. I do expect a pretty significant slowdown to the pace of the game, actually, looking at this. Ganks are way harder to execute as long as people are paying attention, which they're not always paying attention in solo queue or in amateur play, right? Junglers are way more incentivized to farm. Junglers don't want to waste their time doing something useless when they can't sweep if they're going to be fully punished off of this. It's going to slow down the game. It's going to slow down the game a lot. Will it guaranteed slow down the game in amateur? No, people are going to do stupid things still, and people are going to die to things they shouldn't. But as the jungler, just anyone who was giga forcing on lanes because the meta was spam ganking, it was good, and who was very willing to go down CS, I was very willing to go down CS, you do have to be more concerned about just doing that now. It's time to freshen up on the rest of the jungle fundamentals that we've been allowed to neglect. Items. Cosmic Drive sucks. Very bad. Can't compete with, like, any of the actual pen items or anything. Like, the CDR just doesn't create a better spike for anybody who wasn't named Rakan. Fiendish. So it's now an Amp Tome item rather than a Ruby Crystal. It no longer gives health, but it also gives 90 AP. You know what? I think I still like this on Rakan despite the lack of HP. Does Cosmic Drive find a new niche? Realistically, yes, but only on those kinds of AP utility champs who are happy with not buying pen. It should actually feel like an appealing option for Seraphine, for Zillion, for Rakan, for potentially Lane Karma. But on mages who are intended to do damage, no, absolutely not. On Silas? Yeah, 90 AP is a lot. It's still a 3k gold item with 30 A haste. It is just a giant stat stick. That's what it is. And the stats are just better for some of the core users. Even though it looks a lot more appealing, I still have to compare it against the generic standard mage items. Like, I have to check it against Shadow Flame on a lot of candidates. Cosmic Drive would 100% lose out against Shadow Flame. I have to compare it against, like, mid-game Void, like a Rabs or something. It probably can beat Rabs on certain champions now. So, like, as an end game thing, it could actually be pretty good. But yeah, that's my gut instinct. It's like Seraphine becomes stronger. The raw haste stat stick needs a reason to be purchased, even though it now has 90 AP. Is my takeaway. Plated steel caps. Steel caps now looks for all auto attacks for its damage reduction, rather than auto attacks tagged with just auto attack and nothing else. That means that steel caps weren't doing anything to auto empowers. What? Wait, that means it wasn't doing anything to, like, allow EW or, like, any auto resets. Wait, this item sucked even more than I thought it did. So, my take on steel caps was that this passive was this item was only good on two types of champions. Top laners, who are expected to be durable enough to actually take a lot of auto attacks in a trade, or 80 carries who have no other on-curve armor options. Those are the only two champions that actually gain enough value. To gain value from Steel Cap's passive, you must have durability backing that up. Now, I didn't realize that part of the problem with it was just how restrictive this was, and it is definitely nice that it's reducing Tibbers damage, as chat says, right? It's reducing Tibbers damage, it's reducing all auto empowers, it's reducing, like, I wonder if it's reducing, like, some cleave spells that are, like, tagged as autos or something, right? Like, it's reducing a Phelios R. How funny is that? So, with the context of that and realizing what specifically it wasn't affecting, it's going to be way better in top lane. There's a chance that it does become, like, a little better on some junglers, some supports and stuff, but with the context of what I understand, like, I'm going to be a bit conservative on this prediction, and I am going to assume that it's still hard to compete with Lucidity Boots or with Merc Treads, without having astronomical amounts of durability behind you, so, really, really good for top laners. Seraph's Embrace are receiving some overall nerfs, which I think is completely reasonable. It's making it a bit of less of a one-stop shop, minus 50 HP, minus 10 AP, which is echoed on, like, Archangels. Seraph's is very good, and because it's a lifeline item that is mandatory to build on some champions and just feels okay to build on some others, like, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to subject you to my initial impressions of Grasp and Triumph. They were pretty scattered, pretty all over the place, and took forever to draw any kind of conclusion, so let's just go straight back to the patch notes, shall we? Grasp of the Undying is losing 0.5% max health healing. In exchange, you are getting 2 more HP per proc, assuming you're a melee champion. We're not really talking about the ranged condition. It ultimately looks like kind of a small change. We're thinking it might minorly impact bruisers in the middle lane phase, like level 6 onwards. We're probably going to feel a small healing change, mainly the bruisers that have the option to take either Conqueror or Grasp, right? The champions who are just bound to Grasp will not change anything. Triumph, meanwhile, is going from 10% of missing health to 2.5% of maximum health plus 5% of missing health, which they say should reduce the healing at low HP and increase the healing at high HP. So, again, that's taking a bunch of bruisers who really do like closing out that kill, continuing to fight, unlocking their next rotation of defenses thanks to Triumph, and it is making their job a little bit harder. This one feels like a more impactful bruiser nerf. I want to check their power, especially with the context of prior bruiser itemization changes, even though it still appears to be the best option. So, like, truthfully, Grasp on its own doesn't look like very much. Triumph on its own looks like a little more impactful. But with my own personal experience, it's going to be hard to predict, like, exactly how bruisers are impacted. There's definitely going to be a few of them that, like, I'm really not happy with power-wise. I just unfortunately couldn't tell you who they are. So if you're, like, a big top lane carry player, and you were running a bunch of bruisers who were running, like, Grasp, Triumph, just check it again. Just like the bruiser itemization changes, if that truly is all you play, then you will still be able to make it work, I promise. It's just theoretical bruiser power level is definitely seeming to be reduced, and we're already in an 80 carry oriented meta. We'll see how this plays out, right? But TLDR, This one's not huge for most of the game. This one is. In ARAM, there's a lot of miscellaneous changes that I'm not going to go over, but Tower Rebel is gone, which is awesome. This is big if you don't own all the champions, and if you're trying to break into amateur play but need to build up your pool, awesome. It's cheaper. This is a great, great, great change for bringing new people into the game and sharing, like, whatever positive, healthy sub-community you have. Because, like, for the love of God, don't let a new player start League of Legends just alone. Please support them. Please give them hope. But we love this game for a reason, and it's nice that more people are going to be able to share it with us. I mean, so that's 13.5, right? Yuumi's broken as hell. There's a lot of really, really low impact changes in this patch, even though it looked very big. At the same time, there's definitely some changes that matter, and some changes that matter that don't look like they matter too much, right? Most of the big impactful changes are the systemic ones. The jungle change is huge and changes how the game is played to a degree. I really do want to keep an eye on this because I'm not super confident in what I said here. Yeah, but I mean, game is approaching a very healthy state, I think. And I'm really happy to see the direction that a lot of things are going. But for amateur teams, it's like, just if Yuumi is enabled in your league, please do something about it. Please, please, please do something about it. Make sure to spend some time adapting to the new jungle changes coming up on this patch. Like, spend some deliberate practice time just feeling it out, seeing how things have changed, because if you don't do it sooner rather than later, you'll hit the finals or, like, any form of playoffs in your league and just, like, be clapped immediately, and you won't know where it went wrong, right?